Capital One is our sponsor here at OSCON for a day of discussions about open source and why it is so important for new stack organizations everywhere. Capital One is at the forefront of this new open source world with several efforts such as the opening of its APIs and open sourcing core technologies such as Hygeia, its DevOps dashboard. Learn more about Capital One and its focus on developers at developer.capitalone.com. Hey, it's Alex Williams of the New Stack here at OSCON, where it's the second day of our podcast, and we're discussing open source and the transformation that comes with open source, and talking to a lot of companies like Capital One, who's the sponsor of this event, but also new companies like Convox, who I'm here today with Noah Zoshki, who's the co-founder of the company, Convox. And Noah, thanks for joining us. Really appreciate it.
Yeah, great to be here and great to chat.
So I was just asking you, the Convox, tell us a little bit about Convox and about its roots, and perhaps then a little bit about who you are and who your colleagues are in developing this.
Sure. So Convox, it's a business and open source project I've been working on for about a year now with some of my colleagues. And what it does is it's a open source cloud platform. And so there's one command, Convox install, and you run that, and it sets up an Amazon account. It sets up a platform inside your Amazon account that's all production ready, has all the monitoring, all the auto scaling stuff configured. And then there's another command, then you can just do one command, Convox deploy, and deploy your application. So trying to just make Amazon and Docker super simple, work for developers. There's this really nice golden path that it helps show you.
What do you mean by golden path?
Well, so what I'm seeing is, let's see, Docker's out there, Amazon's out there, clearly super powerful tools, yet there's so many options and configuration and things you need to learn how to be successful with those. So we're doing it open source and finding the parts that work really well, finding the configurations that work really well, and making that available for us to use, for our community and users to use.
So how do you do that?
Well, the first, probably one of the biggest things is I personally and my team has a ton of experience with Amazon.
Tell me about that.
Sure.
What is that experience?
So before working on this, I worked for about 6 years at Heroku managing the AWS infrastructure there.
Oh, okay.
So there, learned everything about building a big production system on Amazon, but at the same time learned, really about what developers want and what developers need. And first there's something I've always been seeing there. It's like Amazon is it's super powerful, but super hard to use. So for us, we take that expertise, know how to configure VPCs and container clusters and auto-scale groups and load balancers, and then taking that expertise and putting it and packaging it and making it really, really simple to get.
So what are some of the learnings that you've had about what developers really need and what they don't need in Amazon?
Yeah, well, let's see it. In general, I still have a fairly simple model that still comes from Rails. Like your classical Rails developer, there's still tons of that out there. That's actually, what many, many companies are doing and should be doing. They don't need all the bells and whistles that Amazon has, that Docker and the container ecosystem has. They need a load balancer, they need some sort of scaling, and they need just really nice workflows for how to deploy, how to run a migration, how to scale something up and down. And so really a big part of our project is taking some of those options off the table. It's like, here's the right way to configure a load balancer for Rails. It's still fairly complicated. You need an ELB, you probably want Nginx in there, then you have your Rails application, stuff like that. So, it's really just understanding these application stacks and then finding the smallest, simplest ways to get that on Amazon.
So, I want to get to your open source, community development, but first I'm curious about, what is actually the technology behind this application, Is it because it can't be really the workflows? The workflows are basically just a different way to work.
Sure.
But is it is it in how you connect to load balancers, for example?
Yeah, so let's see, there's kind of a couple key technology things we're doing. One, we're building everything in Go, and so it's a nice little Go API, Go CLI, and it's a great language to just kind of automate all these cloud API-based things. And then the other technology, it's really Amazon itself. It's just unlocking what's there. So a key example, we're using CloudFormation for everything. Super difficult service to use. It's this crazy JSON configuration file that you have to read 800 pages of manual.
Oh, really?
And figure out how to use it. And I'd say that's a stumbling block for a lot of people. It's the right way to do it. You want to just send Amazon a configuration and tell it to do the right thing. But learning this particular service is quite challenging. So that again is where our expertise comes in, the open source stuff comes in, and peer review helps a ton for that. It's like, hey, here's the CloudFormation stack configuration that we have. Is this working for you? Maybe we need to add another option. An example, right? Load balancers. There's 4 different ways you can run them in Amazon. So do we want to support all those? What are the use cases for them? Like I'm constantly, working with our community to figure out questions like that.
Okay.
But it is largely a configuration question.
It really is.
Yep.
Huh? Okay. So how does it? How do you apply Docker into this model?
Yeah. So Docker. I love Docker. What's happening now, it's clear to me that Docker, the APIs, containers, and images, those primitives are the new standard. So that was actually step one. Is we were playing around with the initial versions, and we're like, do we really need containers? We can use VMs or whatever, but it just so happened that ECS, Amazon's container service, came out at that same time. But it was very clear that you should be building images as early as you can in your pipeline now. You can build Docker images on your laptop. You can push them to a registry. You can have your CI do it. And then it actually turns out, running those in production is great these days. There's all these native tools, Amazon and Google and everything support Docker natively, so there's actual support from the vendors, the infrastructure vendors. And so for us, it's just a question of how can we really unlock the power of those APIs, the building images and running containers and cool things you can do with them.
Is this in any way a replacement for the services that Docker offers?
It certainly competes with some of the tools they're building.
Like what?
So let's see. So Docker Swarm and Docker Data Center, we're all working on the same thing, which is again tools to just configure and manage as much infrastructure as you want or need to make it as simple as possible.
So you're a container service, in a sense.
It is. It's a container service under the hood, absolutely. Yep.
Which has some people skeptical about. Actually, isn't this just a feature set that AWS will add? Or any other major cloud service?
Certainly.
Perhaps?
Yep. What I see happening is that I think that's a question for all of us.
Right.
Amazon's constantly climbing the stack. They have Elastic Beanstalk. Google's working on this stuff. They're building Kubernetes and running Kubernetes as a service. It's totally true, but I see there's always going to be this gap, like the final bit of usability, the infrastructure providers either can't do or don't want to do. It's because there is that final little bit of customization that they can't say, hey, there's only one, this is the best way to use Amazon. They need to keep the platform open. So it creates an opportunity for, it is largely a question of taste. It creates an opportunity for people that are building applications the same way we see it to kind of share a lot of these common patterns, and it's things that the raw infrastructure providers can't really satisfy. So
tell us about the open source project, and I'm curious on its beginnings and the approach you've taken to it. I mean, feel free to discuss the licensing model that you've chosen.
Sure.
How you're doing the oversight, and how really then that is affecting how you develop your services and the management of your organization?
Sure, yeah. So open source is a huge part of it. I don't even see why you would try to build any tool like this in the closed anymore. So one, it's almost forced upon us all.
But did you start with your own open source platform from the start?
Yeah, we very early. It's Apache licensed. Very early we knew this was going to be open source. We wanted to build it all in the open. We wanted to build a community around this.
And the Apache license was chosen because it's just so well known and it's
right, as permissive as possible.
Yeah.
These tools at this layer, you need to be able to understand them. You need to be able to modify them. These are here to help you. So an Apache license lets you also help yourself.
So you're a commercial company, right?
Yes.
You're a commercial operation. How are you? The costs of open source for you internally are what?
Yeah, so certainly we are a team of full-time developers, and so we need to pay ourselves to build and maintain the software. What's really interesting is increasingly that is the largest cost. It's pretty fun being an entrepreneur right now. So many of the other traditional costs with running a business, we're a distributed team. We don't have an office. We have a bunch of Amazon credits to do all our prototyping on. Amazon really is out there trying to help early stage companies get going on the platform. So it's really, the cost is just building the software.
So I'm curious on how you then are, defining how you allocate the resources, the engineering resources. So I expect you're developing a commercial version of your service.
That's right.
And this open source version, right? So
yep.
Does everyone work freely on both? Or how do you organize it so you have the best efficiency possible? Because you're such a tiny company, you really can't have it any other way.
Sure. And yeah, open source to me, it's all about the leverage. And so
what do you mean?
Let's see. So we do have a little closed platform. We have our web management console, and that is where we're working to monetize things, and it's a team management tool. But that is trying to be as simple as possible. We do devote dedicated resources to that, but the engineering time on that, as much as possible, feeds back into the open source project. So we have, the main project. You look at it as an API. It's an open source API that that's the interface that everybody talks to talk to the cloud stuff. So there's an open API, there's an open client, there's an open command line interface, and then we have a tiny closed web interface, but they're all talking to the same thing. So if we're sitting here looking at...
so the closed internal web interface is almost your API lifecycle management platform, isn't it?
Yeah, it's mostly I would say mostly right now a team management tool.
It's a team management tool for the development of that API.
For the users of our platform. For
the users of your platform.
But to get back to your the original question, most of the work goes into the open source platform bit. If we're looking at things that we either some of our customers need or we think we want to get in the platform, it's really just trying to get that into the open source project as soon as possible. So generally it's like open an issue saying, hey, here's something we want to do. And what's amazing in open source is immediately people in our community will offer their expertise on that thing, like, oh, that's a terrible idea, don't do that, or oh, that's a great idea, we want to do exactly the same thing. Every so often, people show up and do the heavy lifting because it's a cooperation thing. An example of that is somebody showed up. We built the original VPC configuration, and somebody showed up and said, "Hey, this is a great foundation, but our we did. The original, when you install Convox, it configures a VPC."
I see.
And so somebody showed up and said, "This is a great foundation. we want the even more secure VPC that doesn't have any outward facing, any inbound or outbound stuff. Here's why we need it. We have some sensitive data, we have whatever. And so then we collaborated and really, somebody helped write that in our community for the project.
So how do you manage yourself to work as efficiently as possible? So when a new service is requested, do you immediately just push it out into the community? How do you do that? How do you manage that process about going through that decision to how you're going to manage that from a community perspective? Because now you're thinking about that community who's going to help you with that, but also you're thinking, well, we got to think about this in terms of almost like in our roadmap for our own commercial offerings.
Yeah. So the main thing is, we've been working on this for a year, and I feel like we did get our core platform functionality really locked down. So that was really important. We just needed some time to do that. And so now what happens? I am a very strong believer that anybody should be able to propose an idea, try to give them feedback immediately if that's something that is in the roadmap or is not. That's certainly the toughest one, but an important one is just saying no, this is not something we think will fit in this project. Getting that feedback as soon as possible is critical. Other than that, there's a few things I see. It's trying to enable the person with that idea to work on it themselves. So that is all to me about documentation. It's about testing. For us, we do kind of prioritize stuff. We're still just as agile as possible. The final step is release management. Super important. We spent a lot of time building tools that any time we want to merge a change, whether it's a tiny bug fix or a whole new feature, it goes through a big testing process where we set up a new Convox in 3 different regions in Amazon, deploy 2 different apps to them, check all these edge cases, and that's our core platform. As long as that works, the feature, either the bug fix is good or the feature you added, hey, we're happy to start experimenting with that. So really, checklists and release management are a huge part of that, and trying to make all that as transparent as possible.
You're also interestingly, you're also dependent on AWS, right? Because the VPC platform is not fully baked, right? It still is. That's maybe not a fair way to say it, but there's features in it that it doesn't have that you would expect to see. For example, extending the registry service to VPC.
Yep. So that is a great example, and I think one of the reasons why you actually do want something like Convox is we are a little middleware on there, and something I've been seeing happening. An analogy is the polyfill pattern in the browsers, where it's the different browser engines don't support all these things, but you can build shims. So we've done that actually over the year a couple times. The registry was the first one. When ECS came out, there wasn't any registry, so we took the Docker registry stuff and ran it inside your VPC.
Right.
And we look at this and we say, of course, the whole goal of this is to have a private platform. Private registry is really important. Okay, we actually have to build some of that or integrate some of that right now. Then, as time went on, Amazon released their container registry, and it's kind of a no-brainer. It's if Amazon has a service, if you're using Amazon, use their services instead of this software. So we're in the process of, we've migrated most of the regions over to using the Amazon registry. Another example of that is logs. Out of the bat, Amazon didn't hook up all your container logs to get them in a place where you can store them and tail them and all that stuff. So that's precisely what we can take our systems engineering expertise, fill in those gaps, and the most important thing is, as long as we can do that in a way we can always evolve and kind of switch these things out under the scenes, we'll be able to continually follow fast what tools the whole ecosystem has out there that we see we want, what services Amazon has available, and keep just kind of rolling with the punches with all that.
Well, this is where your Heroku experience comes into play.
It certainly does. one of the biggest challenges is migrating, and it's maintaining infrastructure. Like setting up a one cluster to play with is really easy. Setting it up and saying, hey, we're going to maintain this forever and keep changing some things underneath it is a lot harder.
I think of like those movies where like the guy's blindfolded and assembles the submachine gun, kind of thing. Like you guys are there just like blindfolded.
It certainly helps to have seen a lot of these patterns happen a few times. So I feel like I can almost predict when Amazon's going to release things just based on
really?
we can, when you use it, you can see the gaps. They become very clear. And you can kind of start guessing like a strategy to navigate that.
Yeah, that Amazon Web Sense.
Yeah, but it is a
sixth sense.
It is a strategy. The goal is to figure out how to, and we're talking on Amazon. This is true of any infrastructure provider. We're just always trying to figure out how to maintain, how to migrate. The goal of the cloud is that your stuff should get easier, better, faster, cheaper over time. And so we're really hoping to be able to maintain that pace and actually deliver that to our platform.
Well, Noah, thank you very much for joining me in this conversation. I learned a lot, and good luck with Convox. Keep us posted on its development, and we'll look forward to talking again soon.
All right, it was great chatting.
Thanks.
Thank you. Yep.
Capital One is our sponsor here at OSCON for a day of discussions about open source and why it is so important for new stack organizations everywhere. Capital One is at the forefront of this new open source world with several efforts such as the opening of its APIs and open sourcing core technologies such as Hygieia, its DevOps dashboard. Learn more about Capital One and its focus on developers at developer.capitalone.com.